Chapter 6. Josie stumbled backward until she hit the wall. Luke stopped short. His eyes widened in surprise, as if he was startled by what he was about to do. Josie raised both arms, trying to shield herself from the attack. "Luke, please!" "No!" he screamed. With a loud cry, Luke swung his arm down, digging the blade of the letter opener deep into the top of the mahogany desk. Breathing hard, he let go of the handle and stepped back. He stared for a long moment at the letter opener standing upright in the middle of the desk. "Josie," he uttered in a hoarse, frightening voice. "Josie. Almost." He took another step back, still gasping for breath, his features twisted in horror at what he had just done. "I've got to get out of here," he said, more to himself than to Josie, his voice barely a trembling whisper. He ran from the room, bumping the door frame hard with his shoulder, but not stopping. Josie stood pressed up against the wall, staring at the letter opener until she heard the front door slam behind Luke. Then she exhaled loudly and moved to the desk. "Wow," she said, and cleared her throat, which felt tight and dry. "Wow." The intercom on the den wall crackled to life. "Josie, are you there? Are you home?" It was Erica from upstairs. Josie reached for the handle of the letter opener and tugged. "Yeah, I'm home," she called to the small box. "You're late," Erica said. More lectures, Josie thought, rolling her eyes. She managed to pull the blade out of the desktop on the second try. She slid some books over to cover the hole. "Can you come upstairs?" Erica asked. "Rachel is asking for you." "Maybe later," Josie replied. She had to sit down. She was trembling all over. She had to think. She was terribly shaken by Luke's wild attack. So out of control, she thought. I've never seen anyone that out of control. "Rachel wants to see you," Erica insisted, her voice sounding shrill and tinny through the speaker. "Tell her I'll be up as soon as I can," Josie said irritably. The intercom clicked off. Everyone's mad, Josie thought. Everyone's mad at me. And what have I done? Nothing. I just want to be left alone. Still feeling shaky, she moved toward the leather couch, but something caught her eye on the table against the far wall, the day's mail. She turned and made her way to the table. Sifting impatiently through the magazines and mail order catalogs, she pulled out a square envelope addressed to her. Another Valentine. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she tore the envelope open. This card was heart-shaped, bright pink. It said, "Hi, Valentine. Remember me?" on the front in fancy script. "Oh, brother!" Josie muttered aloud. Reluctantly, she opened the card to find the printed message crossed out and a new message printed beneath it, this time in red ballpoint ink. "This Valentine's Day, no memories to save. The only flowers for you will be on your grave." Slamming the card down onto the table, Josie glanced up at the calendar on the wall above the desk. Valentine's Day was Saturday. This has got to be a joke, she thought, forcing herself to start breathing again. No one is really planning to kill me. That's impossible. Isn't it? Chapter 7. The crackling of the intercom woke Josie. She groaned and squinted at her clock radio. 12:30 at night. She buried her face in the warm pillow and closed her eyes. The crackling from the box on the wall continued. Why do we have an intercom in every room? Josie wondered. "Josie, please come." Rachel's voice sounded high and frightened through the little speaker. With a loud groan, Josie pulled herself up, kicking back the covers. "Josie, come to my room," Rachel said, pleading. "Why me?" Josie grumbled aloud. Why is Rachel awake at 12:30 at night? And why on earth is she calling me? The intercom crackled loudly. "Josie?" Rachel's voice sounded strained and scared. Josie sighed and stretched. Okay, I'm coming," she muttered. She lowered her feet to the floor and stood up. It was cold in the room. The old windows rattled from the stiff breeze outside. Her radiator was silent. Outside the bedroom window she could see only solid blackness. "Josie, are you coming?" Rachel's voice was a pleading whisper now. Josie could barely hear it over the static. She made her way through the darkness to the hallway. The floorboards creaked with every step. I hate this old house, Josie thought. I hate the creepy sounds it makes, the groans, the creaks. This house moans as if it were alive. Josie shuddered, suddenly afraid. The kids at school told such frightening stories about Fear Street, about ghosts and evil spirits, about murders and disappearances. Most of it probably wasn't true, but some of it was. Fear Street certainly hasn't been lucky for us, she thought bitterly. Rachel's room was at the far end of the hall. Josie dragged one hand along the wall as she made her way through the dark, creaking hallway. The wall felt cold, unnaturally cold. A cold breeze ruffled her nightshirt. Where was it coming from, she wondered. There were no windows in the hallway. A ghost's cold breath. The words popped into her mind, causing her to shiver again. Don't get carried away, she scolded herself. The floor was cold through the thin carpeting. She jogged past the bedroom, past the guest room. The house groaned and sighed as if warning her, telling her to go back to bed. Rachel's room was dark and silent. The door was half open. Josie pushed it open all the way and slipped inside, breathing hard. She was chilled and frightened. "Rachel?" she whispered. No reply. The room was so dark, she could barely make out the outline of the bed. "Rachel, did you call me?" Josie's voice came out a frightened whisper. No reply. Josie crept up close to the bed. Closer. Ow! She stubbed her toe against the leg of the bed. "Rachel?" Josie could hear her twin's soft breathing, steady, slow. She squinted into the darkness. Rachel was asleep, on her side, head resting on the pillow, her long hair loose, a smile on her face. "Rachel, did you call me?" Josie whispered. Rachel didn't stir. "What's going on?" Josie wondered, shivering. Did she call me, then fall back to sleep? Did I dream that on the intercom? Did I dream that the intercom came on? Wrapping her arms around herself, she took a last, lingering look at her sleeping twin. She looked so peaceful, Josie thought, so happy, so normal. She hurried out of the room, tiptoeing silently. She half walked, half ran through the cold blackness, holding her breath until she safely got back to her room. Sliding into bed, Josie pulled the covers up to her chin and shut her eyes. I've got to get to sleep, she thought. I've got 2 exams tomorrow. Her heart pounded in her chest. She opened her eyes and stared wide-eyed at the dark ceiling. The light fixture over the bed seemed to be reaching down for her, reaching to grab her. Again, she scolded herself for having too much imagination. Why doesn't the heat come on, she wondered. Why does it have to be so cold in here? Why can't I fall back to sleep? She had just started to feel drowsy again when the intercom crackled to life. Josie sat up with a start, listening to the loud static. "Josie, please come." She could barely hear Rachel's voice over the crackling. "Huh? What's going on?" Josie cried aloud. "Josie, please, hurry." Rachel sounded strange, frightened, her voice very tight. Josie quickly made her way past the buzzing intercom, out into the hall, the floorboards groaning with each step. Her bare feet padded over the thin carpet as she hurried down the narrow hallway. "Rachel? What's wrong?" She stopped in Rachel's doorway, her heart pounding, and pressed her hands against the doorframe to steady herself and catch her breath. "Rachel?" No reply. "Rachel? Why'd you call me?" Silence. Josie moved silently to the bed. Rachel still hadn't moved. She was sound asleep on her side, the same faint smile on her face. Her eyes were closed, her breathing gentle and slow. Josie lowered her face to her sister's. "Rachel," she whispered, "are you playing a joke on me?" Rachel didn't stir. Josie stared at her for a long time, squinting in the darkness, waiting for a sign that Rachel was really awake, that she was only pretending to be asleep. Rachel was definitely asleep. "What's going on?" Josie wondered as she turned and crept from the room. "What is going on?" She felt frightened and confused. She hadn't dreamed the voice on the intercom, the pleading whisper over the crackling static. The voice had been real, Rachel's voice. Had Rachel been talking in her sleep? She had never done that before. Was Rachel playing a mean joke? She had never done that before either. What is going on? Josie thought of running downstairs to her parents' bedroom and waking her mother, but she decided against it. Mrs. McLean was such a sound sleeper, she was impossible to wake. Besides, she had to get up so early to go to work. Josie decided not to disturb her. Instead, Josie returned to her room and dived into the safety of her bed, shivering as she pulled the covers up high. She shut her eyes tight and tried to concentrate on getting to sleep. But what was that sound? Was the intercom still on? Was that someone breathing? Was that soft laughter she heard? "Ow, you're brushing too hard." "Sorry," Erica muttered. She pulled the brush through Rachel's hair with long, gentle strokes. "I was thinking about something else." "I like when you brush my hair," Rachel said, smiling. She sat in the chair in front of her dressing table mirror, watching Erica's reflection. Erica stood behind Rachel, raising the brush to the crown of Rachel's head and pulling it all the way down through the beautiful, thick hair, then raising it again, lifting the hair with her free hand as she brushed. Erica frowned, thinking angry thoughts about Josie. Josie had promised to take care of Rachel this afternoon. She had sworn she wouldn't forget or duck out this time. So Erica had arranged with Mr. Peters to hold a special tryout for her after school. But after last period, Josie was nowhere to be found. She had completely disappeared. Erica had called home from the payphone outside the gym, hoping that Josie had gone home. No answer. Josie had obviously slipped out, forgetting about Rachel once again. She was probably somewhere with Steve. Erica had no choice but to apologize to Mr. Peters and hurry home to wait for Rachel. She had spent the last 15 minutes brushing Rachel's hair, thinking about what she would say to Josie, growing angrier with every brushstroke. "Is Josie coming to see me?" Rachel asked suddenly. It's as if she was reading my mind, Erica thought, startled. "No, Josie isn't at home right now," she told her sister. "Brush harder," Rachel said, staring up at Erica's reflection in the rectangular mirror. "Okay." "We need to have a family meeting," Erica thought angrily. "I can't let Josie do this day after day." "I was very smart in school today," Rachel said, grinning like a little girl. "That's good," Erica replied distractedly. "The teacher said I was very smart," Rachel said. "That's very good," Erica told her, pulling the brush through the straight red hair. Rachel's expression turned thoughtful. "Josie is my sister, right?" she asked, wrinkling her forehead in concentration. "Yes," Erica replied. "Josie is your sister, your twin sister." Rachel thought about this for a long while. Then she surprised Erica by saying, "Josie doesn't like me anymore." "No," Erica protested, letting the brush slip out of her hand. She bent down to pick it up from the carpet. "Josie still likes you, Rachel. Why would you say such a terrible thing?" "No, Josie doesn't like me. Josie doesn't talk to me." "That's not true," Erica started, but Rachel interrupted. "Well, I don't like Josie anymore," Rachel cried, her green eyes lighting up. "I hate Josie." "Rachel, calm down," Erica scolded, putting a firm hand on Rachel's trembling shoulder. "Calm down. Don't get all excited." "I hate Josie," Rachel repeated. "I hate her. I hate her. I hate her." "Don't say that," Erica insisted. "Shh, just calm down. Let's brush your hair some more, okay?" The phone rang. Erica tossed the brush onto the dressing table and hurried to her room to answer it. "I hate Josie. I hate Josie," she could hear Rachel chanting. "Rachel, please!" Erica shouted, reaching for the phone. She raised the receiver to her ear. "Hello?" "Oh, hi. Is this Erica?" a boy's voice asked. "Yes. Hi. It's me, Jenkman." "Oh, hi, Jerry," Erica said enthusiastically, revealing how pleased she was to hear from him. "Is Josie there?" Jenkman asked. Erica's enthusiasm faded. For a moment, she had thought Jenkman was calling to talk to her. "No, Josie isn't home," she told him dispiritedly. "I don't know where she is." "Oh," Jenkman said, sounding very disappointed. Then, to Erica's shock, he added, "Did Josie get my valentines?" Chapter 8. "Dave, you look terrible," Melissa said earlier that same Thursday at school. "Thanks for the pep talk," Dave muttered, shaking his head. They lingered outside the door to Mr. Millen's classroom. Dave was leaning against the tile wall, his black hair scragglier than usual, his dark eyes red-rimmed, ringed with dark half-circles. "I didn't get much sleep last night," Dave said, scratching his jaw. "This math exam, I'm really sweating it." Melissa tissed sympathetically. "Hey, how's it going, Kinley?" Donald Metcalf gave Dave a hearty punch on the shoulder as he headed into Millen's classroom. "You going to ace this test?" "Yeah, I'll ace it if I don't copy off you," Dave replied, rubbing his shoulder. "Metcalf is really a big ox," he whispered to Melissa. "You're in a great mood," Melissa said sarcastically. "Metcalf is your buddy, remember? From the wrestling team?" "I'm sorry I talked my parents out of getting me that math tutor," Dave confessed, changing the subject back to the exam. "I really thought I could get this stuff, but I don't understand it. I missed 3 days with the flu, and I've never caught up." He yawned noisily and shifted his backpack on his shoulder. The bell rang right over their heads, startling them both. Josie McLean hurried past them into the room, diving into her seat as the bell stopped ringing. "You'll do okay," Melissa told Dave softly, putting a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "No, I'm dead meat," he said forlornly. "Dead meat." "Millen's tests aren't that bad," Melissa assured him. She tugged affectionately at a scraggly strand of black hair that had fallen over his forehead. "Come on, let's go in before Millen starts to howl." She grabbed the sleeve of his sweater and pulled him into the room. Dave slumped into his seat behind Josie. Melissa continued on down the front row and took her seat in the corner. Mr. Millen began passing test papers back down the rows without saying a word. A few seconds later, he gave the okay to start. The room was silent, so silent Melissa could hear the buzzing of a fluorescent light on the ceiling above her head. Melissa read over the entire test. There didn't appear to be any surprises. She dived into the first problem, scribbling calculations on lined paper, referring back to the test paper as she worked. She was halfway through the fourth problem when she saw Josie walk up to Mr. Millen. Josie leaned down to speak to the teacher, who was slouched at his desk, poring over a magazine. The teacher glanced up, startled. Josie began to whisper close to his ear. From her seat in the front row, Melissa could hear Josie's whispered words clearly. "Mr. Millen, would it be okay if I move my seat?" she asked. "Move? Why?" Mr. Millen stared at her suspiciously. "Well?" Josie whispered reluctantly, glancing toward the back of the room. "Dave Kinley is copying off my paper?" Melissa could feel her face grow hot. Dave is in big trouble now, she thought unhappily. I can't believe Josie is doing this. Josie and Mr. Millen whispered a bit longer. Melissa strained but couldn't make out any more words. She saw Josie gather up her test and scrap paper and move to an empty seat by the window. Melissa wondered if Dave knew he was in trouble. She returned to her desk, struggling to concentrate. Why didn't Dave ask me to help him with this stuff, she wondered. Too proud, she decided. Sometimes Dave was just plain weird. He never liked to let on that he had a problem, that he was human. He always liked to pretend that he was on top of things, that he had everything under control. At least he could have asked me to study with him, Melissa thought, shaking her head. Now what's going to happen? When the bell rang, ending the period, the test papers were passed to the front. Mr. Millen collected them all, then dismissed the class. "Oh, Dave, could you see me for a minute?" he called, his face expressionless. Melissa saw Dave hesitate at his desk. "Sure," he stammered. Melissa closed her eyes. Poor Dave, she thought. He's dead meat, just as he predicted. She gave him a worried glance as she passed him and headed out the door. She stopped across from the classroom, greeted a few friends who were passing by, then leaned against the wall to wait for Dave. He appeared a few minutes later, his face bright red, his expression glum. "Josie turned me in," he muttered, and uttered a few curses. Her head bowed sympathetically. Melissa began walking toward her locker. Dave followed, muttering angrily. "Can you believe it?" he demanded. "Can you believe that little rat would do that to me?" Melissa stopped at her locker and raised her eyes to his. "But, did you do it, Dave? Did you copy off her paper?" "So what if I did?" Dave snarled. Melissa dropped back, startled by his anger. "Are you going to get on my case too?" he cried. "I just asked," Melissa replied softly. She unsnapped her combination lock and pulled open her locker. "So, what did Millen say?" "That big jerk. He said he was giving me a 0, Dave told her, his voice breaking. "That test counts for half the grade, so if I get a 0 for half my grade..." He kicked a locker angrily. "You know what that means? It means I get kicked off the wrestling team." "Oh no!" Melissa cried. "Yeah, I'll get kicked off the wrestling team," Dave repeated bitterly. He cursed some more. "And that means I don't get my wrestling scholarship, and that means I can't go to college, all because of that..." At that exact moment, Josie came walking by. Dave reached out and grabbed her arm. "Ow!" she cried. Her eyes flashed at him. "Let go of me!" she screamed nastily. "Why'd you do it?" Dave demanded, squeezing her arm. "Let go of me!" she repeated shrilly. She jerked her arm out of his grasp. "Why'd you turn me in?" Dave insisted, his dark eyes wide with fury. "I don't want to talk about it," Josie said coldly, glancing past him to Melissa. "I mean, what choice did I have? You were leaning over so far to see the answers, you were breathing on my neck." Dave sputtered in rage, but no words came out. Josie spun away and hurried around the corner. Several kids had stopped to stare at the angry confrontation. Dave uttered an angry cry and slammed Melissa's locker door shut, the sound echoing down the hall. "She's wrecking my life," he screamed at the top of his lungs. "I hate Josie McLean." "Dave, stop. You're totally losing it," Melissa cried. He didn't seem to hear her. With another angry cry, he took off after Josie. "Dave, come back," Melissa screamed, terrified by his rage. "Come back! What are you going to do?" Chapter 9. Josie stared at the social studies textbook. The words became a blur. shimmering black streams on a white page. She'd been gazing at the same page for half an hour, unable to concentrate. She couldn't get Dave Kinley out of her mind. I can't believe he and I used to go together, she told herself. She thought of their angry confrontation in the hallway at school, all because she had told Mr. Millen that he was cheating. She didn't want to get Dave in trouble, but what choice did she have? There he was, practically hanging over her shoulder, copying every answer. He was bound to get them both in trouble, and that wasn't fair. She had studied hard for that test. I did the right thing, Josie decided. So Dave is angry. Big deal. Dave is always angry about something. He'll get over it. She returned to her social studies book, but the words refused to come into focus. Feeling nervous, upset, she pushed her chair back from the desk and started to pace back and forth. The clock said it was 7:30. Josie still had a lot of homework to do. I'm so tired, she realized. I didn't get much sleep last night. Because of that intercom. Because of Rachel calling me again and again, asleep all the while. A shiver crept down Josie's back. She glanced at the rectangular gray box on the wall, and as she looked at it, it clicked on. She heard a cough, then Rachel's soft, pleading voice. Josie, can you come to my room? No! Josie shouted, startled by her own outcry. No! Not again! Not again! Josie, please come to my room. Rachel's voice pleaded softly from the small speaker. No! Josie cried. Erica is there, Rachel. Erica will take care of you. I've got to get out of here, she decided. I can't take this tonight. I really can't. She grabbed her blue down jacket from her bed and hurried out of the room. The intercom speaker buzzed and crackled. Rachel's pleading voice seemed to follow Josie down the stairs. She didn't breathe until she was outside. She slammed the door behind her. At last, Rachel's voice disappeared. Was Rachel really calling me? Was it a trick? Am I cracking up? Josie didn't care. She just had to get away. Away from all the anger. Away from all the pain. It was a clear, cold night. The snow crunched under her feet as she made her way to the car in the driveway. Her breath steamed up, gray against the black night sky. Somewhere down the block a cat cried, sounding like a human baby. Steve, Josie thought. I'll go see Steve. He's the only one who understands. This was a good idea, Josie said, flashing Steve a warm smile. I was so upset, but now I feel calm. She grabbed his gloved hand and pulled him along with her. You're a good skater, Steve said, struggling to catch up to her. Josie's skates glided almost silently over the ice. She loved to skate, sliding so fast, feeling so weightless and free. She let go of Steve's hand and, moving gracefully, started around the circular rink. There were only a few other people at the Shadyside indoor rink, a couple of younger kids stumbling over each other with their mother cheering them on, and another teenage couple, dressed in bulky sweaters and wool ski caps, not from Shadyside High. Josie completed her circuit, gliding effortlessly, enjoying the slicing sound her skates made on the ice. Watch this, Steve said, grinning. He started skating backward. Not bad, Josie told him, grinning. She skated up to him as he backed around the rink, smiling at her. Can you do this? He asked, challenging her. I don't think so, Josie admitted. You know who's the really good skater in my family? Erica. She's not at all athletic, but she can really skate. Next time, I'll invite her, Steve joked. Thinking of Erica made Josie think of Rachel. Her smile faded. She shook her head hard as if trying to shake away her thoughts. Can we sit down for a bit? She called to Steve. Seeing the change in her expression, he agreed. A few minutes later, they were sitting in a corner of the small skating rink cafe, sipping steaming hot chocolate from white cardboard cups. Thursday's a good night to come here, Steve said, glancing around the cavernous building. There's no one here. It's almost like having our own private rink. Scooting his chair in, he accidentally banged the tiny metal table with his knee, causing a little of Josie's hot chocolate to spill over the side of the cup. Sorry, he apologized. That was klutzy. I don't care, Josie said, distracted. Coming here was a great idea, a real lifesaver. I just had to get out of the house. He locked his eyes on hers. His smile faded. Things are tough at home? It's just so depressing, Josie said, her voice catching in her throat. I'm just so unhappy at home, all the time. She took a sip of the hot chocolate. It burned the roof of her mouth, but she didn't care. She could feel her unhappiness welling up, about to burst out of her. Should she hold it in? No, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She had to talk to someone. Steve was a good listener. Steve squeezed her hand. You're depressed because of Rachel. Josie nodded. Because of Rachel? Because of Erica? Because of everyone? What's going on? Steve asked, nervously tapping the metal tabletop with his fingers. Josie told him about the night before, about the intercom clicking on, about Rachel calling to her in that tiny whispery voice, then appearing to be asleep. I feel so guilty about Rachel, Josie continued. Every time I see Rachel, I feel guilty. Every time I see that sweet smile, that childish expression, every time I brush her hair, every time I talk to her, every time I realize that Rachel will always be like a child, that Rachel will never grow up, never have a family, never have a real life. Every time I see her, so beautiful, so helpless, it just makes me want to cry, Steve. I feel so guilty, so helpless, too. Steve exhaled loudly, shaking his head. I don't know what to say, he muttered. I guess it'll just take time. I mean, Erica makes it even worse, Josie interrupted. All Erica does is try to make me feel guilty. Guilty about not spending time with Rachel, guilty about not spending more time with her, guilty about not taking care of Rachel, but I just can't bear it, Steve. Why can't Erica give me some space? I mean, she must realize that I feel guilty enough already. Don't upset yourself, Steve said uncomfortably. Want to skate some more? Josie shook her head. She could feel hot tears form in the corners of her eyes, but she didn't care. She let them run down her cheeks without attempting to wipe them away. I still love Rachel, she said. She's my twin sister after all. I love her, but I can't stand to be with her, to see what's happened to her. That's why I stay away as much as I can. That's why I only go home when I absolutely have to. It'll get better, Steve said lamely. You'll see. He finished his hot chocolate. Then he tapped the bottom of the cup nervously against the tabletop. Really, you'll see, Josie. She shook her head and wiped her wet cheeks with both hands. Erica doesn't understand, she continued, ignoring Steve's discomfort. She thinks I'm just being mean, irresponsible, but I'm not. She just doesn't understand. Nobody does. Josie, really, Steve started. Look, she interrupted. She reached into the back pocket of her jeans. Look at this one. She unfolded a card, another Valentine, a bouquet of red roses on the front. She shoved the card at Steve with a trembling hand. Just look at this one. He took the card and read the handwritten rhyme aloud in a sing-song voice. Who's sending these cards? Don't bother to wonder. On Valentine's Day, you'll be 6 feet under. Steve stared at the rhyme, printed carefully in black ink. He narrowed his blue eyes thoughtfully. Do you still think Jenkman's sending them? He asked. Ever since I dumped him, he's been following me around, pestering me like some kind of sick psycho. These have to be jokes, Steve said, closing the card and handing it back to Josie. Just stupid jokes. Josie crumpled the card into a ball and shoved it into her nearly empty hot chocolate cup. You think so? Jenkman is weird, but he's not a murderer, Steve declared. It's just a stupid joke, Josie. You shouldn't take it seriously. I don't know how to take it, Josie stammered. This is the third one. They're really starting to get me scared. What if he means it? Call him up and tell him to stop it, Steve advised. It's just his dumb way of getting back at you for not going out with him. He's impossible, Josie said. He follows me home from school. He's always at my locker. He calls sometimes, and... She stopped abruptly. Her mouth dropped open. She pointed over Steve's shoulder toward the ice. Steve? Steve caught the alarm in her eyes. What's the matter? He scooted his chair back and turned around to follow her gaze. There's someone there, Josie told him, her voice revealing her fear. Someone is watching us? From behind the food stand? Steve stared hard. I don't see anyone. Josie jumped to her feet, knocking her chair over. It clattered noisily to the concrete floor. There! I see a shadow, Steve said. But... Is it Jenkman? Josie asked. I don't know. Steve stood up too. He stepped around the table and grabbed Josie's arm. Do you want to go? She nodded. Yeah, let's get out of here, please. They returned their skates and hurried out the door. As they stepped out into a cold, clear night, Steve pulled her close and kissed her. She leaned against the skating rink doorway and kissed him back. She raised her hands behind his head. His blonde hair felt surprisingly soft. She held his head tightly, pulling him to her, forcing him to continue the kiss. She realized she didn't want the kiss to end. She wanted to stay there like that forever, in the clean, cold wind, in the silent darkness, alone with Steve. She didn't want to think about who was spying on her inside the skating rink. She didn't want to think about the scary, threatening Valentines. Most of all, she didn't want to go home. A short while later, she found herself saying goodnight to Steve in her driveway. The old house, bathed in an eerie yellow glow from the porch light, hovered in front of her, cold and uninviting. Josie leaned across the front seat of the car for one last goodnight kiss. Then, sighing, she pushed open the car door and reluctantly headed up to the front porch. She waved to Steve, pulled the front door closed behind her, and stepped into the dark front hallway. She could see the twin headlights of Steve's car roll down the wall as he backed down the drive. "Anyone awake?" Josie called in a half-whisper. It wasn't that late, she knew, around 11 o'clock. She tiptoed past the intercom on the wall, as if not wanting to awaken it. She could see a light on in the kitchen. "Who's here?" she asked, making her way quickly toward the kitchen. "Erica, are you up?" She took a few steps into the kitchen and stopped. No one there. Who left the light on, she wondered. There were some bowls beside the sink. Someone must have had ice cream, Josie decided. She took a few more steps, stopped again. There was something sticky on the bottom of her sneaker. Had she stepped in gum or something? She leaned down to examine her sneaker, and saw what she had stepped in, a dark red puddle. Cranberry juice? Had someone spilled cranberry juice, and not wiped it up? No, there was too much of it. Another puddle. And another dark puddle, even larger. Josie followed the trail of puddles with her eyes across the linoleum to the kitchen door, which led to the backyard. Why was the door open? Staring in horror at the figure lying in the doorway, Josie knew at once what the dark puddles were. She raised her hands to her face and started to scream.